Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Before we jump into it though, I need to give a final shout out to this amazing Kickstarter. You have not been part of this channel for long if you don't know what this Kickstarter is all about. Project Deos is the ultimate, and I say this with absolute confidence, it is the ultimate world building tool. This map making suite, which is going to come out in a year's time or so, depending on how fast they can develop it based on the backing. Look at those numbers, they're so far overfunded it's not even funny. The goals that have been unlocked are absolutely amazing. Those goals include standalone desktop applications, but who cares? Look at this. Build your entire world, build the zone or generate the zone based on the world map that you've made, build cities, generate cities, take the city map, and then do the building map inside of it. I'm not going to say any more because that's it. You know Project Deos is out there. It's in the last few days when this video comes out. It's literally, the countdown is there to the final stretch, to the final push. This is just the bee's knees. I cannot endorse it enough. I really think that this is going to set the tone for map making software from now until I don't know when. These guys are just going to dominate. You choose an environment, you can create trees, and what I really like is, look, it doesn't make individual trees, it makes forests when you do that, but it can also make individual trees, so you have ultimate control. I mean, this is it, and they've unlocked so many things, all the different environments, all the different habitats. I mean, I hope that you realize that although this is definitely a sponsored video, I don't care. This is a brilliant piece of software, and if you haven't got on board yet, you're going to have to get on board when it comes out, because if you make maps, Project Deos is the only answer. This behind me is the great expanse, the wilderness that opens out and promises adventure. It is a space where you might roam free, you might explore different territories, you might encounter savage beasts, difficult to understand, but so complex in their society. This is definitely a place for adventure, for exploration, for dynamic discoveries, for all kinds of amazing, wonderful experiences. This is the great wilderness. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Campaign Creator. My name is Guy, and today we're going to be unpacking the wilderness. How to describe it, how to prepare for it, what happens when your players decide they're going that way, and they want to head to the top of that mountain behind me, or perhaps they want to go and explore the river just down there, or maybe it's even into the forests where they might discover some kind of lost treasure. You have no idea what's there because you can't plot, plan, or navigate for everything. So how are we going to do it? Before we get any further though, if you like this video, hit that like button. If you subscribe, that'll certainly help bolster the channel. And of course, hit that Goblin Bell to be reminded of when new videos come out. Today's video is sponsored by Dungeon Fog, and all of the maps that you will see used in today's video were created on Dungeon Fog. And you're going to see that we're going to be using a lot of Dungeon Fog assets in terms of preparing for the unprepared journey that is the wilderness. Now, what are we going to be doing? How do we prepare for the wilderness? Well, we've got three things that we can look at. We've got the option to refer to our maps. Our maps are going to help us. Now, we're not talking just localized maps, we're talking regional maps, perhaps even world maps. So we're going to be looking at those, and we're going to see what those can help in terms of giving us information about running wilderness campaigns. We're going to also look at the NPCs in the area and see how they're going to make your wilderness adventures feel as if they've been planned all along. And then finally, we're going to look at what maps should you be making when you have some downtime, and what kind of time are you looking at when it comes to trying to calculate how much you actually need. And of course, right at the end of the video, there's a bonus tip for you in terms of running wilderness adventures on the fly, almost. So let's get into it. So let's refer to maps. So I'm going to take this silly hat off And we're going to talk about maps. Now, the maps that you're seeing on your screen currently, this is a build that I made in Dungeon Fog, and we're going to come back to it in a little bit. So for now, off you go. Thank you. So when you look at your maps, look at the existing territories. Now, we've done this once before, where we looked at the distances between areas, and we looked at what sort of foliage was roughly in the space. But what we didn't look at was what are the potentials. So even just looking at this behind me, this vista of a lake with a little river down here and distant mountains yonder, and then down here we've got a nice little forest, several little forests actually, and some glades. And then we've got islands. We've got a whole lot of forested islands just over there that our characters could explore. So what does that mean? That means for us, when we are looking at our maps, look at the geography and look for the interesting geography. So if the characters decide to go out into the wild, you've got your city plan, you've got your big adventure plan. Now they've decided, no. We are journeying elsewhere. We are going across country. This is country. This is very interesting country behind me. Your map is also going to show you something similar, but not nearly as detailed. That is a good thing. So what it allows you to do is it allows you to look at your blank canvas, because when you really zoom in on maps, aside from something like the Deos suite, where it is generating stuff for you as you go in, normally maps are big blank spaces in between the big forest, the big river, and the big mountain. So that means you can fill in all of that detail. But now how do you do it without your players going, oh, but it wasn't on the map, so why should we, this just was not fair? Well, yes, a gigantic river wasn't on the map. So that means that you can't just throw in a gigantic river. Well, you could actually, because if there's suddenly a gigantic river, that's an adventure in its own right. Where did this river come from? How did it get here? What caused it? This is unnatural. This is definitely unnatural. And now you have suddenly an emergent adventure where the druids have decided that there should be a river here, or there's a mad duke who's decided he wants to irrigate the inner desert and so is building a canal. All kinds of things suddenly pop up. But generally speaking, you don't want to throw that kind of twist into your map journey, so to speak. Your players will become very nervous about walking across the wilderness if that's the case. So what we do is we let our PCs make some rolls. Most systems have got some kind of method of determining local geography or perhaps historical records, or there's a myriad of things that you can use in your arsenal as a GM to determine what the PCs know about the outlying area. Again, the way that you're going to do this is that you're going to look at your map, think about what kinds of adventures you had before, in terms of, did you have a thwarting mission, a discovery mission, a collecting mission, or a delivery mission? Think about the one that you had before. Think about what you're going to do now for your characters. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go and look at the videos on those different types of adventures. Now, depending on what you choose, perhaps it's a delivery. The idea is that as the PCs start walking, let's say, for example, the town that they're in, is in this little forest here. You've decided that that's the map. The map indicates there's a large lake, there's some islands, maybe there aren't islands indicated on the map, and of course there's distant mountains yonder. The players want to go from their little town to the dwarvish mines that are in those mountains over there. So they're either going to have to charter a little boat across, or they're going to have to wander off the map and go around that way, or perhaps they're going to try and go around this way and come in from that territory. Either way, it doesn't matter. If your PCs are going to do this, simply have them roll a check. Well, make a history check. You recall that this particular lake is rumored to have what they call terror islands. And the reason why they call terror islands is because they pop up at random and often sink or reef or beach ships. As a result, it's often customary to throw a few copper coins into the lake before you start your journey to appease the evil deity that lives within this lake. All that you've done is set up a whole bunch of expectations for the wilderness journey. It cost you nothing. You made up an evil deity that lives in the lake, so if you decide that the party needs a little bit of adventure, or if the players go, an evil deity, you say? Sounds like we've got some thought. If they pick up on it, run with it. If they go, okay, cool, well, we chuck some coppers into the lake, It means that they're not particularly interested, or that they are playing their characters and that they are respectful of local customs. Either way, if you have decided that your wilderness journey from the little town in this forest here to the dwarvish mines over there is going to involve a small adventure because you want to play it out, you want to pad it out, maybe you want to have a little bit of fun as well, you've created a whole lot of expectations. There's islands that are going to be popping up out of this lake, and that's why they're not drawn on your big map, which the players have access to, assumedly. But the expectations are there. They can start sailing across. Now you could give them an encounter with a ship that's reefed on an island. You could give them an encounter with the demon in the lake. You could give them all kinds of things that they could then have, because it makes sense, because you've built up the expectation. Now, maps also give us expectations. So when we're looking at our existing maps, and let's look at this other map that I also created at the same time. This is just a time lapse of how long I did it. I'm going to talk about those in a little bit. But when we look at maps, maps give us a whole bunch of expectations as well. There's a river down here. We expect swamp, we expect river. There's a forest, we expect ambush predators, we expect crazy druids, we expect witches' huts. There's a giant lake, we expect sea monsters, water creatures, merfolk, all kinds of things that live in the water. There are forbidden lost islands, so we expect treasure. And of course then there's mountain ranges which lead all the way up into the snowy reaches right at the very top. So there's lots of things that we expect from this map. Don't be afraid to play into those expectations from time to time. So let the PCs have some general knowledge that's given some flavor, that's built up some expectation in their heads, and then let the map do the rest. So once we've kind of looked at our map, that's a huge trove of information already. We need to then entrench it, and we need to make it feel as if it was all part of your master plan. Why do we need to do this? Well, because this is how to be a great GM, and this is how, as part of campaign planning, I focus my mind and I fix myself to do this before every session. How can I make sure that what is done in the session is proved in the session? So I always try, and this is a mantra that I'm going to be adopting moving forward, is prove it. So what that means is that the NPCs in the region are going to prove whatever you say. It doesn't have to be everything, but in general, they will prove it. So, local lore. The PCs have got this check. They know about the monster in the lake, perhaps, about the copper coins. However, you still need to prove it. So I would also include a sequence, if they're going across the lake, where there's a wrecked ship beached up on the shore, and there's a beggar sitting in front of it. "Arms for an old sailor wrecked by the demon reefs," he says as the PCs walk past. That's proof that the rumors that the PCs have heard about is true. It's visual proof, it's something that you can describe, you can talk about the smell of this old sailor, the rotten wood of his ship, the skeletal frame of the mast and the bits of hull that are left. All those kinds of things just play into it, and you're just proving something that you've set up an expectation. Establish those rumors. Let the PCs wander past. Oh, poor old Dorag. If only his ship hadn't been reefed, he would have made a fortune on that cargo. Oh, yeah, poor old Dorag. Yeah. If we're trying to establish something about the swamps of the river, because the PCs are perhaps vacillating, should they cross the lake or should they cross the river and go around the side, we can establish other things. We can seed it. So all of these things that the NPCs are doing is they are proving what you have established. They are proving what your players are expecting. They are proving the space. Well, I suppose I was contemplating trying to avoid the lake completely. Only problem is, of course, you've got to cross that bloody river. And that talks about the quicksand quickbog on the other side, which is particularly nasty unless you like, drowning in sand. Again, proving options, proving stuff, using your NPCs. So they're not just a tool now that are going to idly sit by and wait for the players to come and talk to them. They're now going to be actively walking past, having snippets of conversation, being people in their space. Once you've established what that space is, use them to establish it, to seed it, to just make it come alive. It's going to really, really push your campaign to the next level. And it also allows you, and this is a very powerful tool that I think a lot of people don't utilize correctly, it allows you to look at your players as you're telling them this information and watch their faces. Do their faces light up? Is there a sparkle in their eye when they're hearing something? Does it glaze over as they have heard something that you've used before, perhaps? Try and read your audience, and they really are an audience in this case. You are setting the scene as the narrator, as the game master. This is part of what you do. Using your NPCs correctly and reading how your players respond to them is absolutely awesome. And finally, what maps should we make? Really, when you're talking countryside, you've got a whole lot of maps that you could potentially make. And we're going to talk about generic countryside, which is just maps of rolling hills, perhaps. Let's bring back one of those maps now. This is a roadside ruin. So there's a little path wandering through. It looks to me to be like a bit of a boggy ground, that sort of yellow grass. There's dead trees all over the place. Quite possibly that would fit next to our river that we were talking about with the photograph behind me in the video. There is then a ruin. Now that ruin I've made purposefully generic. There's some dead bodies that have been hidden. There's bits and bobs here and there. Again, just proving that this is a ruin. It's generic. There's nothing specific about it. I can then populate it with brigands. I could populate it with undead spirits. I could populate it with whatever I choose, with whatever I have seeded and proved using my NPCs or my character knowledge that the players have rolled for. I can then populate it with whatever I so choose. So it's a nice generic ruin. Another one is a cave, or quite possibly just a roadside. Caves are always useful. PCs are going to find caves and they're going to go in them. Sometimes they won't, sometimes they will. It depends on how you have proved them. If it's just a generic cave and there's no sign outside of anything that's happened, maybe they won't go in it. If there are paw prints, if there's blood, if there's things like that, the party probably will go in it. That's just the nature of players, I guess. A nice country road, such as this one, a nice country road will always work for you. Now, this is a forked road, so left or right, it always poses an interesting question. There's a signpost, there's some old gallows at the edge of the road there. Are those gallows for a specific purpose? Were they constructed hastily? Again, what have you proven? What are you trying to establish? So the map is doing far more than just being a battle map upon which battle will take place. I've also dropped in an ancient statue that leads from a little path off of the main road, and then there is a camp. Is that bandits? Is that just a trapper? Is it a hunter? Is it a group of kobolds? Is it some gnolls? Is it Klingons? It doesn't really matter. These maps are generic for a reason, and they are there to simply allow us to do things. Now, both of those maps, of course, I did in Dungeon Fog, and neither one of them took me longer than 35 to 40 minutes. I was playing around with lighting effects and things, so that slowed me down a little bit. But generally speaking, within an hour and a half, I had two really cool looking maps. Now, if you spend that once a week, you're going to end up with 4, 5, 6, 12, 20 maps, which you can just pull out as you so need. So those are my thoughts on how you bring the wilderness to life, what you can do to infuse it, to make it feel real and to make it feel planned. It's really, really important. Of course, you can take all of that information during the session or after the session and just put it into your World Anvil space and keep track of everything, making your notes, and it will just create this very vivid, very rich world. So until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of campaign creation. Now, for those of you that have stayed behind for the bonus section, we will be talking about this in an upcoming video, but I thought let's just add a little bit more to it. And that's where not only do we talk about proving the location, but we talk about walking it. Position yourself in the actual village, down here in the forest. Let's see, what can we see from here? From here, we can see basically heavy forest towards the lakeside. Out here is a nice clear glade. Perhaps that's where the cattle graze. What kind of economy does this little village have? It's not on the coastline, and if I get out the way, the coast, maybe there's a little harbor in this depression here. Perhaps there's a harbor. Perhaps it's lots of fishing. So we would expect to see fish being dried. We would expect to see boats being made. We would expect to see a culture that focuses more on the sea than perhaps on the territory. If there are cattle grazing in this area, we would expect to see some kind of slaughterhouse nearby. We would expect to see young cattle herds running around, keeping track of all of the wolves and other things that live in this dark area. So there's lots of things that we can do when we start to stand. And I just close my eyes and I stand in this village and I look around, and down there I can see the great big blue lake with those vicious islands. And then I look around and I can see the little houses. For some unknown reason, I'm getting this sense of, are they made out of wood? Yes, I think they're made out of wood. It's a muddy road that I'm standing on. It smells of a little bit of fish, a little bit of salt, and there's definitely cow dung as well coming up. The roofs are made out of a thatch, which is from the local grasses, but there's an interesting little piece of delicate work in that thatch. There's some geometric patterns halfway down, and just at the top where there's a little concrete, or at least a mud cap on top of that. The houses are built fairly close together with one another, but there's lots of jumble around them. Old fish drying racks, nets busy being repaired or hanging. It's a very, very gloomy kind of space inside this forest area. The trees loom around just on the edges. And there's that wonderful scent of pine that drifts in on the breeze every now and again. There's some kids playing around. They're filthy. They've got hoops that they're busy trying to roll in the mud. There's a boy throwing mud at a girl down there, or maybe it's the other way around. Anyway, I close my eyes and I try and focus and I try and live in it. I try and really bring it to life. Now, are you going to be doing this whilst your players are walking down the street? Absolutely. Let them go shopping and you say, all right, well, there's a merchant here and everything that's in the book or everything that's in the merchant's guide or the equipment guide, you can purchase, but you're purchasing it at twice the cost because it's so rare. Go ahead and do your purchasing. Whilst they're doing that, just sit there, look at your map, check, reference, and then live it. And then when you describe it, it's going to be so much richer. It really, really will be. Anyway, until next time, enough from me. Happy map making.